All right, solving for C. So this is a cubic expression. So this is unlike the squared expression. So so one thing you should know is here the highest exponent of x is 3. So we are expecting um 3 roots, right? So but now we are trying to factor, right? We are not solving. So we are factoring. So the first thing to do is to look for a factor, the first factor, and the first way to do that is to use um, the trial and error method as the first approach. So you can say equal to 0 just to know the factor. All right. So so we said r is a factor of this equation if what f of r equals 0. So if f of r equals 0, we say r is a factor. So we write it this way, x minus r. So that is the expression is divisible by x minus r. Okay, so now, we call this method 1, trial and error. All right, so now, so you can start from 1, -1, 2, -2, like that. So if I should try 1, obviously it's not going to work, right? Because we have 1, we have 3, we have 4. So 1, 3, 4, that is 8. So it's not going to be 0. Now the next thing you can try is you can try +2 or -2. So if you try +2, 2 cubed minus 3 into 2 squared, -4 into 2 plus 12. What do we have? We have 8 minus, this is 2 squared, 4, this is 12, and this is 8, this is 12. Now 8 minus 8 is 0, -12 plus 12 is 0. So that shows x equals 2 is a factor because what f of 2 is 0. So we can say r is equal to 2, right? So r is equal to 2. So now if you want to write that, because f of 2 equals 0, now you say x minus what? X minus 2 is a factor. X minus 2 is a factor of this expression. Okay, so now that is the first method, right? To know the first factor, that is the first method. The second method, okay, they kind of work together. To use the try and error method, okay, to know the numbers to try, you can use this factor equals plus or minus constant divided by leading coefficient. So not just constant, but their factors. Factors of the constant divided by factors of the leading coefficient. So what is the constant in this expression? The constant is 12. Constant is 12. Now what is the leading coefficient? The leading coefficient is the coefficient of the highest exponent, that is x cubed. So the leading coefficient is 1. So that is what? That is 12 over 1. But we need their factors. Factor of 1 is 1. But factor of 12, factors of 12 would be what? 2, 3, 4, 6, 12. Definitely, and 1. So these numbers, each of them divided by 1. If you divide each of these divided by 1, you still have these numbers. Remember, I added plus or minus. So you are going to try plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 12. So these are the numbers to try for this trial and error. So I checked for 1 and -1, but I didn't write that. I realized it's not going to work. Then I moved to 2. So +2 worked. So you can also try -2 and so on. But since you know the first factor, which is +2, then there is another method. So we'll go to step 2. There's another method to know the other two factors. All right. Now, since we know that x minus 2 is a factor, we should have 3 more factors, right? Because before you can get x cubed, you have to get something like this. So that's why we have 3 factors. X times x times x will give you x cubed. So now step 2, we have what we call synthetic division. So for synthetic division, you write the coefficient of each term. So the first term is x cubed, so the coefficient is 1. The coefficient of the second term, x squared, is -3, and we have -4, and we have 12. So you just write the coefficients. Remember, you take along the sign. Now we know a factor, right? We know a factor to be 2. So we know the factor to be 2. So the first thing you do, you bring down the first coefficient here, 1. Now next, you multiply this 1 by the factor outside. 1 times 2, you have 2. And the next thing is you sum. So you sum from here henceforth. So -3 plus 2, you have -1. Now your new answer, -1, you multiply by the 2 outside, you have -2. Now you sum again. -4 plus -2 is -4, -2, you have -6. Now you multiply by 2 outside, that is -12. Now +12, -12, you have 0. You must always get 0 here because you are using a factor. The remainder has to be 0. Because you said the one outside here is a factor, so the remainder has to be 0. So now you've reduced the expression to what? Now the new coefficients are 1, -1, and -6. So that is what? X squared -x -6. So this is your new expression. Now this is what we did. Remember, x minus 2 is a factor, so that implies that we have x minus 2, x squared -x -6. If you multiply these two together, you're going to get our expression x cubed -3 x squared -4x +12. So now all we need is to reduce this, and this is easy, right? So you have x and you have x, right? Because you have x squared, so x times x will give you x squared. So you can always use any approach that we've done. You can use your AC and B. So you need 2 numbers. You know that AC is -6 and B is -1. So you need 2 numbers. When you multiply, you're going to have -6. And when you add, you're going to have -1. So you know that those 2 numbers are -3 and +2. So we have -3 and +2, right? So if you have these 2 numbers, you're going to get the product to be -6 and sum to be -1. And as you can see, these numbers appeared in those factors I mentioned earlier, right? So if you use any of these guys, if you use -2 or +3 in that trial and error method, it will still be a factor. So now what have we done now? So we've reduced this x squared. So that shows our final answer will now be what? X minus 2 that we firstly got, and the new factors that we got now. And this will be our answer. So I want you to carefully go through these steps, and I believe you'll be able to solve problems involving cubic exponent. All right, so I will see you in the next problem.